They may be called the next generation, but they're the church of today. Reach, disciple, and mobilize students to share the hope of the gospel. This is the GenSend podcast with Shane Pruitt, Paul Worcester, and Lacey Villasenor.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the GenSend podcast. Been an incredible season so far, and we're going to continue on with that today with a very exciting conversation. And just as a reminder, if this podcast has been helpful to you, we want to continue to just kind of spread and grow those who are a part of this conversation. So if you would, help us spread the word about it. Share it on social media, give it a rating, subscribe, text the link to people who are in your circle of influence if you find this super helpful. But we love doing it. We hope that you love listening in and being a part of this journey with us. And we're going to continue on some great conversations today. Lacey, Paul, how's it going?
Doing good. Doing great, man. Yeah.
It's awesome. Lacey, what about you?
Yeah, doing good. We were just talking about in the last episode, we had a snowstorm, and even one of our guests today had to experience that, got stuck in Texas for a little bit. So, but we're kicking off the new year. We're rolling. We're excited. I'm excited about the rest of this season, and we have a lot of fun people this season. I feel like, last season it was kind of just us three mostly.
Yep.
This time we're getting to talk to some interesting people, and so that's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one thing we constantly want to remind you of is there's the audio part of this podcast, but there's also the visual part. If you want to watch these conversations, we really want to encourage you to go to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's just GenSend, which is a YouTube channel. You can watch these take place where you can see it visually. And today, I feel like, Paul, you and I are kind of connecting, back to our redneck roots. I grew up in the country, been in the city, metropolitan area, suburbs for the last 20 plus years, but I refuse to let the city and suburbs take the redneck out of me. So today I'm sporting my Tractor Supply hat, so I really feel connected back to my redneck roots. Paul, you got on a camo hat.
Yeah, I don't know if Paul has redneck roots, though. I think he has.
You spent a little time in Texas and Oklahoma. He was in Norman for a little bit. That counts, right?
I think I rode a horse one time. Yeah, maybe.
I hear Shane's redneck roots always come out in these episodes because he'll start talking fast and you start hearing the accent come out on certain words.
Yeah. Further,
Casey says,
most people say further, Shane says further.
Yeah. Casey says still, even today, as long as I've been gone away from Lorena, Texas, she says every time we go back to visit my parents, as soon as we cross that city limit sign, she's like, you start talking different, you start acting different, it just comes back. Yep.
But country is in these days. I think that's my claim here is even in California when I'm around, there's all this country wannabe people that are all dressed up like country. So it's kind of like a new posers. There used to be posers that people dress like skaters, but they're not skaters. Now they're people that dress country that they don't really live the lifestyle.
That's true. There's been a rise of cowboy hats everywhere I go now, all over the nation.
I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's an interesting phenomenon. But yeah, I'm stoked to introduce our guest. Speaking of country, no, just kidding. Now they're in a very cool location, Lubbock, Texas, and it is in the middle in Texas there, and decent sized town, college town, and they have an amazing college ministry. When I think about Redeemer Lubbock, the college ministry that they have there is incredible. The amount of students that they're reaching on campus, but not just having a big group. They've really used it as a mobilization platform to send students to the nations and around the world to plant churches. And so it's incredible. And part of this is, so we have our guests today, Brandon Gilbert and Cody Carroll. And Brandon is the Residency and Institute Director for the church. But right before he just took on this role, he was the college director. And then we have Cody Carroll, who's the college director there. And Cody was a part of the residency program. And so it's like a perfect example of how powerful these residencies can be. But yeah, I just love what God's doing through their ministry, Redeemer in Lubbock, Texas Tech area. It's incredible. So we wanted to bring him on and kind of glean all that we can from them.
Yeah,
Glad to be here.
absolutely. Yeah, my family's from Lubbock, and I got it. Well, my mom's side of the family, and I gotta say, I never wanted to go visit them because it really is. It's Texas. Well, now I would say it's grown a lot, honestly, in the last maybe 10 years. But it was like the college, and that was it. There's nothing else there, and so it makes for fun college ministry, I'm sure. But now it's kind of built up.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lubbock, even from whenever I was a freshman 10 years ago, it's like a completely different place. And so even 10 years ago, probably not staying with family and kids, but we're here. We're here by God's grace. We love Lubbock now, whether we like it or not, we love it, and we're glad to be here. So
I love that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think today's going to be an interesting episode. It's going to be helpful to have both of your perspectives, somebody who's been through the residency, somebody who helped lead it and build it. So I know it's going to be helpful for those ministry leaders and pastors who are really passionate about seeing a multiplication of disciples, who are passionate about sending out laborers, and who want to consider some type of way to create a leadership pipeline, a school, an internship, whatever that looks like for them. And so, Brandon, let's start with you. Give us a little overview of the residency, the why behind it. Like, why did you guys start to do this, and what have you seen come out of it?
Yeah, it's such a unique and cool program. And when I think about the reason that I got into ministry and the reason I'm back in this position was, and even college director, was helping leaders lead, right? And so that was in college ministry, calling out leadership, things that we saw in students, and now just into a different different avenue in the residency of how do we create leaders that ultimately can take our place, right? Like, we've been given this time, and we never want to get comfortable. And how do we create leaders that can grow in their spiritual formation and their personal development, they can grow in professional skills, so that when they come out of the residency program, they're ready to be impactful in ministry, on the field, church planting, wherever the Lord may call them. And had a lot of those who've gone to the marketplace and been great marketplace missionaries. When I think about the why behind it was, years ago when we started this, it was like giving young people a chance to explore ministry, explore what working in a full-time vocational ministry looks like. There's a lot more than, going and meeting with coffee and sitting in my office listening to Kumbaya music. Like, there's some logistical things that we wanted to grow them in, and professional things. And this really, helped us fulfill some of that and really leverage the unique demographic that we have at our church, of just young people who are mobile and willing and ready to go.
I love that. Yeah, and Cody, you were part of the residency. What was it like? Tell us kind of what it was like maybe when you were in it, maybe how it's changed a little bit, and how it's helpful to what you're doing today.
Yeah, great question. So like I said, I came to school, or to tech, in 2014, and started the residency in 2018, and it had like just formalized as a program. Earlier, I think maybe one or two residency classes before, we weren't really even formally support raised. Like, we had no training around our support raising, and so I would say I was like patient 2 of the residency program, and it has grown so much since then. And so I think even, going back to what do I feel like I gained from it? I came into college not wanting to do ministry, came to faith as a junior in high school, was a business major, just wanted to make as much money as I possibly could. And then around my junior year, I started talking to my mentor. I was like, hey, I'm thinking about ministry. And he's like, okay, you're doing this Redeemer residency program. It's my baby. I'm trying to get off the ground. This is at the time where it was really just becoming something. And so obviously did the residency. And I feel like the thing that I got most from the program was the freedom to fail and it not be like that big of a deal. It's like, obviously ministry is really important. What you're doing has eternal significance, but to come up with some crazy idea as an outreach resident, trying to reach students, and it totally fail. And then being like, hey, this is fine. And so I think that the biggest thing that I gained was the freedom to fail and learn what works, what doesn't work, and be really, really safe in the midst of trying to figure out if ministry was what God was calling me to.
Mhm. Yeah, Shane, you've talked about a little bit about this in the calling out the called, how we've, lost those opportunities for people who might want to explore ministry, as churches grow in size and just systems. We don't have those like entry level positions per se as much. And so I think residency is cool for something like this, that freedom to fail, like you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I love residency programs. I think that's why they're gaining in growth and more churches are interested in them, is it really does like provide that opportunity for someone who says, hey, I really feel like God's calling me to ministry leadership. What does that mean? What opportunities are there? And it gives them an opportunity to dive in right away. Yeah. I know that we've even talked about this before, Lacey and Paul, like of, a lot of times you may get a teenager or a college student, young adult that goes, hey, I feel called to ministry. And my default response back is like, that's amazing. Like, what are you doing now? And sometimes that it's funny to watch that, like, almost blow their mind. Like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm going to go to Bible college and seminary and then I'm going to do something. Like, no, like jump in like now. What are you doing now? And I think a lot of times, even when someone's saying, hey, I feel called to ministry leadership, I'm still trying to figure out specifically what that looks like. I always say a lot of times God would reveal those specific types of calling in serving. Like just jump in, start serving, start leading, and then God often reveals his calling within serving. Because sometimes you may start serving in a particular area and you're like, oh, nope, God has not called me to this. That's a valuable lesson to learn. Or you may go, oh, I love this. I feel passionate about this. This is what gets me up out of bed in the morning. Like I feel fulfilled in this. And that can take place by jumping in and start serving, being a resident somewhere.
So Cody, you mentioned that you guys raised support to be part of the residency. Maybe either you or Brandy could answer that. How does that work? And because I think that's one of the barriers that a lot of churches have in their mind is we don't have money to do a residency like that. But you guys mentioned the support raising. How does that work out for y'all in your context?
Brandon,
you're great at this, Cody. Cody is great at this, so I'm gonna let him take this.
It's a crazy thing to say. There's like no expectation. So our residency program is based around raising support for the 2 years that they're a part of the residency program. And so what that means is that you, as someone who says, hey, I want to discern a call to ministry, I've made it through the application process, Redeemer has accepted us, or your church has accepted us, accepted you. And you're like, there's a spot on the team. Now, once you make it through all those hurdles, it's really like, okay, now the ministry, formal ministry begins with the support raising process. And so Redeemer partners with a support raising training, agency called Reliant. And so they'll do a Reliant support raising training, typically in January of the January before they start that fall. So we have residents coming on that are starting in July. They just did training 2 days ago. And really, when we talk about support raising, a lot of times, I thought this as a senior in college, was like, it's just this burden. It's like almost like if you've read Pilgrim's Progress, it's like it's the river at the end. Like you have to make it through. You don't have to enjoy it, but you have to do it. And so, but really, I think of the training, like my mindset shifted around like this is ministry. This is not like a means to an end. This is like a part of what it means to like build a ministry team of people who would support you, who would physically provide for your like salary, for your insurances, for all the different things, to kind of support you in that call to ministry. And now on the backside of raising support, like there's very little that I feel like I couldn't do for the kingdom because of the fact that I've raised a little bit of support in my time. And so I view it as ministry. There's people that I didn't even know that hit me up because they heard I was raising support that are now some of my best friends, that pray for me. And so there's a lot there. But in short, like support raising, yes, it's probably because your church doesn't have money to pay, a slew of entry level people, but it's also a really good, almost like foundations of ministry,
the skills you develop in raising support are the same kind of ministry skills that you develop when starting a new church or starting a new ministry. You're making contacts, you're setting up appointments, you're having conversations like that. It's very much, and you're living by faith. You're stepping out in faith. You're taking risks of faith. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure to clarify that because I do think that is something that even there's a lot of small to medium-sized churches that listen to the podcast and they may think, well, that's for the big mega churches, that's for the guys that have it going on, and but really, you can do a lot with just finding creative ways. So it doesn't even have to be fully support raised. Maybe it could be part-time. There's a lot of different ways to play this out. But, like I love to quote Jurassic Park, life finds a way. If you want to raise up leaders, and I think post-college, that 2-year period post-college is a great time to dig a deeper foundation in a student's life. If you have a healthy college ministry, that's amazing. But a lot of times you can do that much more in someone's life. Those first 2 years after college, I think are a gold mine of leadership training potential. Anything you guys would add to that idea?
Yeah, I think that's when we see students coming out of college ministry and whether they've had a full-time job or not in college, you're beginning to see, even with support raise, like Cody said, that's the beginning of ministry. And there's some grittiness that's developed there. And you want to see some grittiness in ministry, right? When you're going to get no's and you're going to have to trust the Lord in the midst of that. And you're going to get the same thing when you're reaching outreach on campus, and there's going to be no's to that. And to be able to just combine those and weave those things into even the program, they're coming in July already establishing some grittiness for what they're going to face. Because, we all know on this, when you start marrying, where you went to church and now that's your job and ministry and all these things are colliding, it's easy to kind of lose your mind in the midst of all of that. And so trying to navigate that in those first 6 months really starts, like Cody said, with some of these early trainings that we have. We just had a couple of days ago with our ones that are coming on. And so I think that's even leadership stuff that's being developed when they don't even know it. And the interesting thing, I'll say this, on the backside of our support raising, we do exit interviews with our residents after their 2-year program. A lot of them will say the most formative, sanctifying time in my residency was the support raising part of it. I had to trust the Lord, and even the stories that come out of that about the Lord just bringing, random people into your life and the trust that's built there. It really does encourage them in their faith more than it is just about a paycheck or whatever on the end of that.
Yeah, that leads into my next question perfectly. And I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but who are you looking for when somebody's applying for this residency? Are there what are the requirements for somebody? Yeah. And what do you look for that you think will make them successful in a program like this? I think that support raising is a good way to weed out people who maybe don't have the work ethic or determination or even commitment. But what are some other things maybe?
Yeah, our first round of our first circle that we're going to recruit from is our college ministry. And so when Cody and his team are sitting down at the end of the semester and they're doing interviews and semester reviews with their leaders, they've got a little circle on there that's hey, you had to choose right now. Is it marketplace? Is it, or all in church members? What we say, hey, you're just going to go somewhere, get a job, be faithful in the church. Is it being sent to a different culture, or is there a part of the residency that you would like to explore? And that's kind of our first lane of and most of these are current leaders within our ministry that are leading GCs, or they're leading gospel community groups, or they're on our senior team, which is our highest level of leadership within our college ministry. And they're learning some skills there. So that's our first. When we just think about the people that we want in there, hungry and faithful and available, really, they're teachable. We're not looking for the perfect person. This isn't a regular, we're going to interview them and we're going to help them discern some of that within the interview process. But we're not looking for polished people right now. We're not looking for who have it all together. We understand that. And I think Dusty, our lead pastor, said the other day, he's if you're not in this sending business for ease, right? There's going to be some ups and downs and some ways that you're going to have some good conversations that are hopefully gospel centered to help them grow. But that's what we're looking for. And we'll recruit from wherever we can to people to come in and do this. Did you have anything, Cody?
Yeah, I think primarily from the college ministry. Our college ministry is just incredible. I think about, this, like, I mean, there's like several, probably 6 or 7 guy sophomores that are like, are just so bought in, to like what we're doing on campus. And they're sort of like unprompted by us. We used to like dig and push real hard, but now by God's grace, it's sort of like becoming this thing where it's like, we don't push so hard. People want to do it. We still will though, sometimes depending on the person, but where there's dudes who are like, yeah, I think I'm considering this. I'm like, okay, great. You're a sophomore. Like, keep being faithful in your GC, like keep coming to campus, because I think that really, like, with the experiences that our, like our college leaders get, a lot of people want to do ministry. You're like, you see people come to faith left and right. You're going on campus and you're passing out stuff and you're playing fun music. It's like, yeah, of course like you'd probably want to do this because it's a good time. And so mostly, sometimes it's hard, but most of the time it is a good time. I think the support raising, kind of going back to like the support raising conversation, is almost like to quote, to quote Tim McGraw, it's like, how bad do you want it, man? Everybody wants to do ministry until like you have to raise a significant amount of money. And so I think even too, using that as some sort of like forging type, sort of like moment for our students where it's like, man, they come out and they believe that they are unstoppable on campus. I mean, like if you raise, the amount of money that we're raising, and we're not, getting rich or anything off, being residents, but it's like, it's a lot of money with taxes and insurance and all the things that, add up.
Yeah.
To then go and say, hey, why don't you go talk to someone you don't know on campus? Like, that feels easy, and so,
Yeah.
So I don't even know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love what both you guys said. Great perspectives there. And kind of what I'm seeing behind under the surface is your college ministry has a really healthy leadership pipeline where you got freshmen coming in, you have community groups, you have leadership teams, and even like a senior leadership team. Maybe you could even help spell out, if you could kind of describe your leadership pipeline within your college ministry. Maybe that would be really interesting. I mean, at least it'd be interesting to me, hopefully to our listeners as well. One of you guys want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I'll do it. Brad, I know Brandon, the look Brandon just made is like, hey, it's your turn, man.
Delegation. I love it, man. That's good.
Sure, yeah, that's time in the game right there. I think, yeah. So for us, we have like almost even pre-freshmen on campus. We have like, hey, like if we can get connected to people who have churches with, student ministries, we're like reaching out to student ministries. And so there's a lot of on-campus stuff, but really all of it begins sort of week 1 freshman year, where we're like on campus that whole week. I mean, like that whole week, making connections with freshmen, encouraging our leaders who are typically sophomores through seniors to then meet freshmen to begin these discipleship relationships, and then calling them to do the same eventually, as those relationships grow. But really, our like kind of leadership pipeline begins with like, hey, on-campus freshmen, reach them, let's go get them. Once you get them, transition cleanly to, like sophomore year. A lot of them will apply for leadership, which is like a super intensive leadership process where we ask every question under the sun. We ask them, when's the last time they did this sin, all the different things. Call them, say, hey, we write out their time expectations. This is what it means to like lead a GC, which is what we call our small groups, gospel communities. That's kind of what they do for sophomore, junior year. We're actually seeing a lot of retention from sophomore GC leaders to junior GC leaders, which is really exciting. And then basically leading these GCs, there's a secondary position too called context leader, which is a lot of time, it's kind of like a supportive group leader for someone who's maybe not ready to lead their own GC, but they're like going to help facilitate, going to be there. And then eventually they'll go on to lead their own GC. Our goal is really not for numbers sake, but as many GCs as we can, because we have seen that our ministry is only as healthy as the amount of like gospel communities that we have. Because really it's like you could throw a bunch of money and get 1,000 students to come and 200 of them are in small groups. And it's kind of like, well, like for us, like our methodology, we want to know the vast majority of the students who are walking in a lot of ways that comes through our GCs. Anyways, and then senior team, typically people who apply for senior team are seniors, and they would say, hey, I am at minimum considering vocational ministry as an option post-grad. And so we won't let people join our senior team unless they're at least open to considering ministry post-grad. And part of that senior team, to almost prime the pump on support raising, is we'll require them to raise about $1,500 in support. And so that goes to like fall retreat, that goes to their spring break trip, that goes to a conference that they get to go to in the fall. Really as a sort of like, hey, you know, like you're saying you want to do this, like likely you're going to do it here. Let's raise a little bit of support, get your feet wet, you know, for just a moment. And then, you know, for the ones who carry over from senior team into residency, they jump into support raising with a completely different vision because they saw on a very, very, very small level how God would provide for them. And so they're like fired up, you know. So that was like the way too quick version. But yes, long story short, we have a pipeline from senior in high school, summer senior in high school, all the way through. Really, Brandon, you know, you could speak to this to like church planner now, where there's a clear next step along the way.
I love that. And, you know, I mentioned that also because we have a resource that Wes Smith, Summit College in Raleigh-Durham area, he and I put together a resource called Creating Your Collegiate Leadership Pipeline. And it has samples. We got to add yours to our list of samples, but we got ones from Salt Company, all the different ones. And it's really fun because we don't tell you what to do, but we have 20 specific questions that helps a college ministry leader walk through how to create your own leadership pipeline. And really, that's the thing. You don't just plug and play someone else's. Maybe start there, but add in and discern what's the best for you guys. And I love that you created that last layer, the senior group. That's amazing. As I'm traveling around the nation, seeing different college ministries, what I'm noticing is that student interns, or kind of functionally, that's what your senior group is. They're almost like student interns. Ministries are utilizing them because a lot of other ministries will recruit your best leaders and they'll give them jobs at youth ministries or whatever else. And a lot of times college ministry, if you can create a almost staff level, intern level role, you can do a lot of good training and utilize their gifts through your college ministry. So that's just something I'm picking up is like some ministries are really utilizing that. So, yeah.
That's great. Shane, anything that you've seen on, you know, I know you travel around and get to see a lot of different types of students and maybe even residents, interns. I know you have Evan still traveling with you. What do you look for in like as somebody who will make a successful resident or intern, even for the journeyman program? What did you look for maybe even in Evan of like, okay, this would make a good journeyman?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, I mean, you know, for a lack of a better term, the Sunday school answers, is there a passion for the Lord? Is there a passion for spiritual disciplines? And then I love what Spurgeon said, is there a hunger for the work? Like, do they actually want to do that? You know what I mean? I think sometimes we're trying to convince people to surrender to ministry. If we're having to convince people to surrender to a calling ministry leadership, then that hunger for the work is probably not there. I think in that kind of same vein, I would love to ask Brandon and Cody, here's one of the main questions I get, whether it's from like a youth pastor or a collegiate leader, is a lot of times they'll go, all right, hey, I had these students, quote unquote, surrender to a calling of ministry leadership. I don't know what to do with them. So, I love the pipeline, but what is that kind of daily, weekly, what are they actually doing? Because that's probably the number one question I get is like, I have these students, but I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. We talk a lot with our leadership pipeline in particular. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. And we'd rather be slow in like digging and really building that foundation of what you said, passion for the Lord and even hunger for the work. And one of the ways that we do that with our ministry, and then even like developing that within our residents, is a lot of them are being discipled by adult leaders within our church, that a way that we're like, hey, this is the next step for you is you're going to have some trainings and we're going to throw you in like into ministry a little bit, but we're not going to throw you in there without a life vest. And so like most of our staff and even adult partners within our church are going to come alongside those. And every week they're going to meet with 2 or 3 and dig into that passage from the sermon that week, dig into some leadership principles. And if there are ways or hurdles that they're finding, hey, this person dominates, as simple as this person dominates the conversation in our small group. How do I handle that? Man, I had somebody come with some really dark things. How do I help navigate that? They're not doing that on their own. And so that's always my first step is like, where are they being like led from? Because if it's just the director of that ministry, there's only so much bandwidth. But if you're partnering with people that you love and that have a heart for the same thing, you're going to see more and more, like Cody said earlier, retention, but you're going to see more and more fruit and evidence, I think, of like faithfulness. And I think we saw that in our ministry. We've been through seasons where leadership's been really hard, and you've had groups of leaders that have not handled that mantle really well. And then we're in a really sweet season where there may be some conversations that are really hard. For the most part, our leaders are really sailing. And we hear that from our adult partners about how they're growing, how they're sharing their faith. And that just leads, like, I think one of you guys said it earlier, is like, it's just the next door. I'm just stepping through the next opportunity and the next opportunity and trusting the Lord along the way. And I think you're seeing that. And that would be my encouragement to those leaders out there, is like, get those people discipled, get them with older, wiser people within your church. They're going to help them be able to discern some of that call and get to know their strengths and weaknesses, and encourage them in that. That would be my first step for them.
Right.
Amen.
I love that. Cody, for a student who feels called to ministry and they're trying to consider their next step after college, I know y'all's program is for those who've graduated college. What are some things to think through when they're deciding between, do I just go straight into seminary? Do I go into a residency? Do I try to get a job, like Paul kind of mentioned, one of those, a job somewhere else? How did you decide? How do you help college students decide?
Yeah, a great question. Yeah, I think, so someone says, hey, I want to do ministry. Assuming the context is they've been doing ministry with us. Honestly, I think, maybe, I don't know if this is true or not. I think that the biggest selling point in quotes, to staying at Redeemer and doing the residency is like, you're already known. Like you do not have to spend 6 to 9 to 12 months, half your residency, just trying to figure out like your role here, to figure out what the pastor's like, to figure out, the systems. It's like you understand the vision, you understand what we're trying to do, and you just slot right in. And so I think for people who are interested in doing the residency, it's like, hey, you come and just jump in, raise support obviously, but then come and jump in. And so that's kind of what I like encourage them, is like, you won't lose any time. Come jump in. And I think that the other thing with people who are considering seminary is the quality of online seminary is fantastic these days. And so my biggest thing is like students a lot of times will come say, should I do seminary or should I do residency? And I'm like, why are you making enemies of friends? It's like, you can do both. Like you really can do both. I mean, I did both. And even, like I did residency. At the end of my residency, started seminary, worked at the church, like even now, like with our residency program, Brandon, how many hours do they graduate with?
Well, 21
hours, man. I would have killed for that. I did not graduate with a single hour, and so, like, even then it's like, this is built into the program. It doesn't, you could do half your degree. And then if you want to move up to, Louisville, like, great, you can do that, but like, I think that my own experience, a lot of times I'll share this, is like, I got to do both. And I think I'm better because I got to do both. That it's not just this, like, you're loading info into your dome and then you're hoping, you can figure out where to like apply it one day. It's like, no, you're like on the ground meeting people who openly do not follow Jesus on campus. And then you're jumping into your residency cohort with Brandon 2 hours later. It's like, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Anything you would add, Brandon?
I think I agree with that. That's my selling point for them, is like, we can do ministry in a classroom, and I am a nerd of nerds, right? Like, I love learning, and like, he's over there snapping at me. I love it. But being able to take those things that I'm learning and put them right into practice is a beautiful thing. And I also think, like, for those that are considering like ministry, I think a residency program, when done really well, can set you up for long-term health within the ministry. Yeah. Instead of just, I got to go get a job, or I need to be a youth pastor. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I was a lead pastor at 25. There are a lot of hard lessons I learned at that time in my life by jumping in there. But I also think, like, long-term success, if we can just kind of slowly turn that dial a little bit, that you're leaving here ready to go. And so like, oh, what do I need to do? I just need to go get a job and just get out of the church. Like our hope is to really springboard you to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm so glad, Cody, Brandon, you pointed out, like, do both. Cody, I like what you said. Don't make enemies as friends, because I feel like in that particular vein, the pendulum has kind of shifted a little bit to where used to, there was this mindset, hey, all right, I'm going to go to Bible college. I'm going to go to seminary, but I'm just going to wait to get my piece of paper. And then I'm going to go change the whole church world, right? Especially when you're younger, you think you know everything, and you're like, all right, I'm going to change it. But I'm not really doing anything until I get that degree that somehow tells me now I have permission to go serve the church, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the pendulum's almost shifted the other way to where I found there's a lot of young adults that go, no, I'm just going to go be an intern. I'm going to go be a resident somewhere. I don't need formal education. I don't need Bible college. I don't need seminary. And I'm like, hey, it's not either or, it's both ends. So I think both can be super helpful in sharpening you for the kingdom and for the local church. Yeah.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Really good.
How has that worked with the 21 hours that your residents get now in the program? Did y'all just partner with the seminary for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Midwestern has been a great partner for us. And some of the programs that they have allow us to offer classes here in our church in person with qualified teachers. And so we kicked it off in the fall, kind of, pre-launched it, and tonight actually is our first night to go after this. And one of our members who has his PhD is going to be able to teach that class. And we get to, the other thing about that is I love that we get to open this up to a multi-generational. So it's not just our residents learning tonight. They're coming alongside families and young adults and singles, and they're going to be able to learn all together over 8 weeks. And so each class is 8 weeks, and we're starting with Old Testament 1 tonight and OT 2 later in the semester. And we've kind of built it out over a 2-year plan for them. And so it's just like a perk for our residents. So we're like, hey, come and you're going to get this and get to leave equipped, with that knowledge, understanding. Even if that's all you do, you're going to have more than you would if we didn't do it.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah. And I feel like more seminaries are open because, Shane, you're right. There has been kind of a swing. And so now I think that, seminaries are like, okay, how can we work together with these churches and ministries that are starting these programs? And I love that you guys are doing that and opening up even beyond the residents. Because I know there's such a hunger in the church that I think a lot of times we miss or we don't step into for deeper understanding, for knowledge, and for maybe the average person that goes to church, like they want to know those things and they have a hunger to learn. So that's exciting. For a ministry leader who is listening to this, Brandon, I want to back up a little bit, and maybe they want to start a residency. They have no idea where to begin. What are some first steps for them? Some things to think through. I love the resource you mentioned, Paul. And maybe what are some things that you wish you would have done differently in the beginning? Maybe let them learn from your mistakes even.
Yeah, that's good. I think I've been in some adjacent to this role since 2020, and even before that as a member and an elder, just getting to kind of see different formations of this. And I think from Cody's first, when his was probably the second class, to be able to have some formalized training around support, that was a big deal. Usually it was like a spreadsheet. Hey, you need to go raise this money and good luck. We'll see if you can do it. And here's a book to read while you're at it. And so I think some of the things that we've considered, even now, as we're trying to bring constant strength to this program, is around these 5 axioms that we've considered are our values for us. And one is spiritual formation. And so thinking of ways that I'm going to be intentional about spiritually forming the men and women that are coming through our residency program. The second is just about biblical exposition. What does it look like for them to understand the Bible, to read the Bible, to apply the Bible, to be able to take what they're reading and be able to communicate that with others. theological integration. That's where the seminary component kind of comes in, is like, what does it look like for us to bring theology into that in practical time? Another one is like professional development, like having a professional plan for them. And our residents are exposed to, they can come and choose the ministry area, from college ministry to our send ministry to worship, communications, like kind of all over the place, family, youth ministry, like, and they get to kind of come in there, but each of our directors kind of has a path for them to kind of walk through. And then lastly is that personal development, just as a human being and a good worker and a good teammate. And we want to make sure that all those things are evident as we're building this holistic person out, and not just getting free labor as a church, but really working on the development, and I say the difference between our interns and our residents is, like, an intern's there to do a job. Like, you're just, hey, here's a task, I want you to give it. And while there's some of that within our residency, a lot of it's like, hey, we want you to develop something. We want you to take something, have a vision for it. Got one of our residents who's he's got outreach mindedness on him. And he's done some things that have really, succeeded, and some things that he's had to go on back and look at with Cody and his team and go, okay, let's keep this, change this, delete this. But we want them to have some ownership over that. And that's always a progression. And so I think if you can consider some of those things that are values within your ministry, and that give them a good experience, you don't want to sell a bill of goods that you're going to get to, hey, come do this. And then it's like, I'm sitting in a cubicle all day reading a book. Like, that's, we want to give them something that's really going to help them flourish. And then I think accountability is the big thing behind that. Like, we work on accountability they meet with their supervisors, they meet with me. They've got a great support staff. And I think this is where it comes down to, as a leader within our church, it's easy to do college ministry in a silo and have a college ministry. It's different to have a church that's about college ministry, right? Yeah. And I think that's the same thing for us. It's like, we can say we want a residency program, or is our church about development? And having our lead directors and our elders on board with that, man, that creates a whole hurdle that we don't have to jump over anymore. This helps us have some freedom in how we develop it.
Yeah, I think too, to kind of add to that, something that, like, I mean, just to gas Brandon up a little bit, Brandon's like one of the best leaders at our church for sure. And I think even too, like, whenever I think about, because I put myself in the shoes of someone listening to this who maybe is like a college minister who's on a big campus and is like, oh my gosh, I'd love to have, residents, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 residents, or even just one resident. And can kind of like see, okay, yes, that would be great. But I think something too that I've learned a ton from Brandon is like the ability to go, hey, yes, we can get residents, but what are you going to then do with them? Are you going to give them meaningful work? That's the thing that I think that's like was the most attractive thing for me, where I got meaningful work. It wasn't just, hey, go read this book and pass out some coffee, though that's awesome. It's like getting the idea of go, hey, I have an idea. Like I was a senior last year. What do we think about changing up these dynamics of how we engage with our seniors? And like, for someone, who's listening that might be thinking, oh my gosh, it'd be great to have all this staff, but your maybe hands are closed on what you would allow someone to do in your ministry that you've probably put a lot of work and time into. It's like, you've got to like be able to let your, like almost like let your young eagles fly, like Johnny, one of our guys who's an outreach resident. I'm like, some of his stuff, man, I'm like, that's a bad idea, dude. But I'm gonna, I'm gonna like step back and be like, I don't think it's gonna work. We don't lose a lot by letting you, soar a little bit. And I have been wrong more times than I can count. So, and some of the ideas are like, dang, that's a good idea, dude. Like let's figure out how to make that happen.
Yes.
So yeah, I think again, just for the person who's listening, it'd be great to have a ton of staff, but it's not going to be what you think unless there's like a willingness to kind of let them run, and even like in the support that they need. So just want to add
good.
that.
I mean, those are good leadership principles to apply to whatever, if you're leading staff or anyone, is having enough structure that people can kind of really have something that they're working towards, but also giving freedom for innovation and trial and error and even failure, even that value of, them processing and you coaching them through failure. So that's kind of a leadership tension there is, yes, we want to have systems, we want to have structure, but also there needs to be this aspect of some leaders, like even thinking about myself, if I was in a overly cookie cutter locked in residency program, I would have been like butting against the walls because I'm kind of this evangelistic, guy or whatever. And so it's kind of interesting. So having that mindset, I love that you have that, is holding those two things in tension is really good.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, Cody, what is something, you went through the program. I know it looks a lot differently now, but just based on your experience in the program back then, what is something you wanted more of, or maybe something you wanted differently? And maybe you guys do it now, maybe you guys don't do it now.
Yeah, I feel like Brandon's gonna know what I'm about to say. I wanted to preach, man, so bad. Like, like it was so clear you don't teach as a resident. I did not care. Like, I was like, dude, give me, like, I'm ready. I got them in my pocket. Like, you feeling sick, man? I got you.
He's like praying for sickness.
Yeah, which is so funny because now that same resident that I mentioned earlier, he's like, hey, man, when's it my time? When are you going to give me the rock? When are you going to pass me the ball? And so yeah, I think there is like an element of like that could go really, really poorly, especially like first year residents. We have like, you can pray in front of people, like it's like, let's keep it like really, really simple. Don't worry about, your outward facing ministry. Let's just think internally. Let's, things like that. But then in the second year, you get to have more of those like teaching reps, sometimes preaching reps, depending on the ministry area. But even that, like, as I think about stepping into a role that communicated right after the residency, like I was like, I don't think I was hindered in my like ability to communicate. Like, I think a lot of that was just like, I just wanted to teach in a mostly negative sense. Like, I just wanted to like, give it a shot and see. But I really do think that because there was like hey, let's slow down, we'll get there, let's slow down, that I'm better for it on the now as a person who regularly communicates. Like, I think I'm better for it, because again, the emphasis wasn't task, it was development. So yeah.
Yeah. So now do they get to lead? Do they lead like meetings their second year? Are they teaching and students? How do you guys incorporate that?
Yeah, I think I can't tell if Brandon's waiting or if he's frozen, but
I'm here.
I think it depends on the ministry area. So it's like for college ministry,
Yeah.
really the main two teaching areas in our residency is like college and students. I mean, as far as like leading meetings, yeah, anybody can lead a meeting. As far as like, maybe leading an adult equipping training, that stuff typically is reserved for like second year students, where you have to like think and, put in a manuscript and like it's going to be like communicated broadly, like things like that. Yeah. That's typically reserved for second year. As far as preaching, though, residents preach all the time in the student ministry. In the college ministry, it's a little bit different. Even like the room and Brandon, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Like the room that we meet in the college ministry is the same room as Sundays, but the youth ministry meets in a different room. And so it's from the same stage, it's from the same pulpit. It communicates a little bit more. And so there's a little bit higher, and there's a ton of kids that come on Tuesday nights. And so there's a little bit higher, I hate to use the word bar, but it's just a little bit different setting. Sure. But again, I would love to hear Brandon's take on that.
Yeah, I think for me, when we think about even college ministry being a little bit different than other areas, one of the places that we find, and I get served as a church planning director as well, is like this is a prime spot for us to develop some of our church planners when they're here, and give them regular reps within hopefully a group of mobile people that will go with them. And so when you start looking at the number of Tuesdays we have of gatherings on a Tuesday night, logistically giving the director a significant amount to communicate to the people that he's getting to lead, then to our church planters, and then we want to bring in some guests and even let some of our elders communicate. That logistical wise within our college ministry just becomes a little bit tighter. We feel that on Sunday mornings as well, where we're at when we look at, the Sunday morning reps that our elders or outside voices are getting. And so that's part of the logistic wise. And then again, it goes back to that slow burn of wanting to create that hunger and a proper hunger within our residents. We find it with our church planners that when they come here and they've been running for years doing college ministry and something, and we say, hey, the first 6 months of your church planting residency, you don't have any responsibilities. We're slamming on the brakes. It's like crawling in their skin, man, because we want them to know, why do you want to do ministry? Like, is it because you want to plant a church? Because you want to love Jesus, or he's called? Like, what is it that's motivating you in ministry? Because that's what's going to sustain you in ministry, and getting to the root of that. And it chips away a lot of pride and chips away a lot of it just has a great waiting has a great way of even creating a good hunger within us. And so that's kind of the intentional part about the different ministries that we have.
Wow.
I love that. Anything you guys want to promote or resource you want to shout out from maybe those who are considering starting a residency within their ministry?
I think there's great resources all over the place when we look at whether that's a Doctrines and Disciplines book, or that Dawson Stone has helped us shape some of that from just an internal perspective. I try to glean from anybody that I can professionally. And so, we'll take books, Leaders Eat Last, and things that aren't necessarily Christian in nature, but reconciling those things back to what we get to do that help them create a vision for themselves. And so one of the resources that we're using for some of our foundational church planters is Center Church by Tim Keller, which has been a great book for church planting and giving a vision for that. But Cody, anything you would have?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to speak to at least my ministry area of like primarily college students, it's like when, we talk about senior team feeling like a really easy step from senior team to residency. And so we also try to talk about having like, hey, going from any leadership position, whether you're a GC leader, making that step to senior team, feeling really easy. And like, how does it fit in to like the residency program, to the church? And so I think even to, like, to Brand's point, if you want to get to this place, you're like, hey, we got this awesome residency, all that's great. It's like, well, maybe you don't have a residency yet, but maybe you have like these really committed leaders. And it's like, well, what could it look like to like give them extra clarity on why they're here? What is it? What are they doing? What are they moving towards? Because I'll meet college ministers, or they'll call me or something. It's like, hey, I have a leadership team. Like, what's the point of leadership team? That's like the first question. It's like, I don't know, and it's like, okay, well, like we should probably start there, like, what are you expecting your leaders to do? And they're like, I don't know. It's like, okay, man, like, it's like, this is like, before we get to all the other stuff, that maybe Brandon could speak to the residency, but it's like, man, let's like do a really good job, clearly communicating why, vision, creating next steps, pathways, all that stuff. So that then a ministry residency feels like a really easy next step. Because for us, by God's grace, it feels like, oh yeah, of course I want to do ministry. I'll stay at Redeem, But that's because they've been getting it since first day of their freshman year, really.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I love that. And we will put that leadership pipeline that Paul mentioned in the notes to guide and help you guys think through even this clarity, building out that pipeline, whatever that may look like for your context. But speaking of resources, we want to shout out some books for the GenSend book club. So whether you're a leader looking to grow in your ministry or just looking for your next read, want to build out your reading list for the year, we're going to be sharing about a book every episode. And so Shane, why don't you kick us off? What are you currently reading? A book that maybe you've read that's really helpful. What do you got for us?
Yeah, as we were going through this conversation, a book that just kept coming to mind. It was a book that I actually recommended to somebody yesterday. It was super helpful for me, when we planted, and I was lead pastor at C3 and we were planting other works, but it's called Gaining by Losing by J.D. Greear. Gaining by Losing by J.D. Greear. And that's so helpful. I love that Brandon talked about, raising up church planters and sending them out. Is typically when you're multiplying, those who are going to like go do that are sometimes your best of the best. And let's just be honest, as leaders, it's never the people you want to leave. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you're praying like, God, raise up this group to go be a core team to get out of here, but it's never those people, right? It's always like your best. But again, it's that mindset of like, are we trying to build seating capacity or sending capacity? And it's just a great reminder of like, really, it's about kingdom multiplication. And so sometimes it's raising up your best and sending them out for the glory of God. So it hurts though, because it's friends, it's some of your best, it's givers, it's small group leaders, it's elders, it's going to be senior leaders, it's going to be residents that God raises up. But it's just a great, helpful resource, Gaining by Losing. JD Greer.
Yeah, and that's one of the advantages we have in doing youth and college ministry is that everyone that we're working with pretty much is going to be sent. And so we want to, I mean, that's an advantage. That's one reason I think it's so strategic, those in the next gen ministry space. But reading a book like Getting by Losing will just be like, oh yeah, this is what I want. Kind of in the vein of training leaders and developing leaders, even one that ministered to me personally. It's called The Making of a Leader by Robert Clinton. And it's basically, he did studies, he's a seminary professor, of all these major leaders in the Bible and kind of took them, what was their leadership journey like? And then he also took major missionary heroes, and guys like Dawson Trotman, Hudson Taylor, people like that. And he looked at their life, and most of the time they came up to these tests, and they had to come across these tests, and he breaks it down in this really logical, biblical way. And so it's Making of a Leader by Robert Clinton. It's been a really helpful resource in thinking about the leadership development through all the stages of life. So yeah, that one's been a pretty heavy one, but really helpful.
I love that. Yeah, the one I kept thinking of was that is really helpful to me when I'm discipling somebody or just talking through, somebody wants to grow deeper in their faith, is the critical journey. It's called Critical Journey Stages of the Faith. I cannot remember the author's names right now, but if you look for that, you'll find it. And it was so helpful to me when I was just, growing, and I got to a point where I felt like I was spiritually stuck, and I was like, man, I want more. And that book was so instrumental in helping me figure out, okay, what do I need to do to mature in my faith and continue to mature in my faith? And then even as I'm discipling people. So that's a great one. We will include all of these in the show notes. Cody, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. We'll include links also to Redeemer if you guys want to check out their ministry and what they're doing. We're so excited about what God is doing through y'all and through the college students that are there on your campus. Check out the show notes again if you want information on any webinars we have this spring and just additional resources. We're so excited to continue this season and for the next couple of episodes. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future ones. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time.